Joining us tonight to better understand the impact of conflict on a country's economy, we are joined by Jim Awad, the chairman of Plimsoll Mark Capital, a global wealth management firm which invests in emerging markets, and he also happens to be 100% Syrian. Thank you for joining us tonight, Jim.
Pleasure.
So we saw in this report that one industry that seems to do well in time of war in Syria is something related to creating arms. But other than that, do you believe what the Syrian government is saying, that the economy is doing just fine?
Well, it's shrunk by half. It's down 50% by most estimates. And I understand what they're saying. They need to say that they are the most prominent party that's in control, but they're in control of something like 50 to 60% of the country. So there's been bloodletting and damage and degradation throughout the country, and they are bleeding to death, the Syrians on both sides. So they're saying what they have to say.
Right. Okay. So basically, there's no truth credence to basically what they're saying.
You know, they are the most prominent force in the country. They are still hold Damascus, and if you had to say there's one power in the country, it's the government, but it's in charge of half the country and fighting for its survival, and it's got half what it had in 2010.
Okay.
So that's the reality.
And in terms of which industries are really being hurt by this conflict, what are they?
I would say it's across the board. It's everything. You've basically ceased to function as a state. It's become city by city, tribe by tribe, Sunni versus Shiite, Alawite versus non-Alawite, Christian versus Muslim, Al-Qaeda versus secular. And so it's devolved into a tribal. It's devolving into a tribal society. So the degradation is countrywide, with people just fighting for survival.
And in terms, though, of businesses, I mean, is it a question of that they're just going to have to ride it through until there's some kind of a resolution, and this could be a decade long? I mean, who knows when it's going to be resolved?
Right. Well, it depends.
So what are they going to do?
It depends how long it goes. And if you're in a business, you're trying to stay alive for the next day. Most businesses in Syria are family businesses, and they're basically just trying to stay alive, to fight another day, to feed their families, and to wait to see if there's a resolution. So you sort of become a barter economy, and to the extent you can get money out of the country, you get it out, which I'm sure that the people with money are getting money out of the country. So you have two scenarios. One is that the civil war continues, and that Syria continues to cease to function as a country and becomes a fiefdom of cities and city-states. And the other is that there is some sort of grand political scheme where the United States makes an agreement with the Iranians, who are the proxy. They control the Syrians, and the Russians buy in which case, if there's a peace agreement, there will be across-the-board opportunity in Syria to rebuild infrastructure, energy, housing, highways. If there's a peace agreement, there will be opportunity countrywide in every respect. If there is no peace agreement and they continue to bleed each other to death, there is no opportunity anywhere.
Okay, well, before there's a peace agreement, we're likely to see weapons inspections begin. Do you think that's going to do anything to increase confidence in a country? No, you don't.
No, I think that's sort of buying time to see if they can get a political settlement. I think the Assad regime was smart to agree to it to avoid a U.S. strike, but I think it accomplishes nothing unless you can get a peace conference. And the chemical issue only addresses the killing of civilians by military and doesn't address the dynamics of the political disagreements. So no, I don't think the inspectors will change the game.
And right now, Syria is very much dependent upon Russia. Now, for whatever reason, if Russia decided not to back Syria any longer, what impact would that have? I mean, could it get any worse than it already is?
Well, if the Russians would only back out if we gave them a peace agreement, if there were a grand bargain between Iran, the United States, Syria, Russia, and in that case, everybody would benefit. But I don't think the Russians really have us by the short hairs here, because the United States is fatigued in terms of wars, and we want to recede from the region, and we have our own energy independence now, so we have less interest, and the Russians are more interested in reestablishing their influence in the area. So I think the Russians will not abandon Assad unless we make an agreement with the Iranians.
Okay, lastly, in terms of foreign direct investment, if there was some kind of a peace agreement, what opportunities would there be in Syria?
Everywhere, because
tourism
they're basically a secular society, aside from the militants who've come in. They were a secular, tolerant society, so infrastructure, middle class, tourism, shipping, rail, transportation. If there were a peace agreement, you could make money hand over fist. I'm not optimistic that that's in the cards in the short term, But were it to happen, it would be because they are industrious people inherently, and secular people inherently, there would be a lot of money to be
Okay, so we need to see that peace agreement.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim, for joining us.
Pleasure.
That was Jim Awad, the chairman of Plimsoll Mark Capital.